Hello, my name is Alexander Wurzer. I would like to talk with you today about the ways of IP strategy and technology sourcing and mergers and acquisitions. So we divided that big topic in three different parts. The first part is about business models and IP. Because when it comes to strategy development and technology sourcing and mergers and acquisition, the key question is always, do this IP fit to my business model? Where do I have a need for IP, or even which kind of IP should I acquire to run my business model better? So this alignment is an important issue. The second part is about IP-based trend analysis and technology analysis. Why are we talking about that? Because first, the idea is to understand what is my position against third parties, against competitors, and what we would like to understand is, are we ahead of the competition or maybe we are behind of competition? So which sources do we have on the one hand, and on the other hand, which opportunities do we have to improve? And the third part is about valuation of IP in mergers and acquisitions, and why that. Obviously, sooner or later, we have to put a price tag on our technology. That means we have to say what is a reasonable amount of money we are willing to pay when we acquire technology, a patented technology, for example, or even a single patent. And therefore, it's necessary to understand the basic rules of valuation. So we start with the first topic, and the first topic is business models and IP. So on my first slide, which is about the increasing IP expenditure and the question, is it just helpful to increase expenditures? This slide should show you that what we know from empirical analysis is that the reality is not shown on the left side of this slide. Why? Because simply just increasing IP-related expenses do not lead to a financial business success. There is no mechanics behind that I can say, I just put more money into the system and I will get more out of that. That doesn't work. What we know is more on the right side, that we have some companies which spend a lot of money for IP and they have only limited business success with it, and we know that some companies spend relatively low amount of money and they haven't, compared to other companies, they have a huge success out of their IP. So what we know is, it is not a simple black box thing where I say just spend more money and you will be more successful. That we have really to look inside, what is the IP strategy within that company, what makes the company so successful, maybe based on their IP, and we call that the business model. This is the explanation why some of the companies are more successful than others with their IP. So on the next slide, I want to show you that we have different industries and we can distinguish this industry based on the question, which kind of general IP strategies do these industries have and how rigid are these strategies, how predefined are they? This is important because when I have a predefined IP strategy, I should know that, and I should know which kind of IP is therefore necessary for me. So when we look to this slide or to this portfolio, then we have on the x-axis, we have the effectiveness of IP as a competitive tool. That means we have here the idea that, for example, in pharma, I can cover my product relatively easy with one patent. It is a molecule, and this molecule can be protected via a patent, and I have a very good enforcement regime for such a patent. So the effectiveness of IP as a competitive tool is very, very high. Compared to that, when I go to, let's say, the telecommunication, there I have thousands, sometimes 10,000s of patents on just one product, let's say on a mobile phone, of course, I can cover a specific technology, but typically compared to pharma, the effectiveness is much lower there to create a monopoly type of position in the market. On the y-axis, we have the potential uses of IP. So that means, is that very rigid or is it relatively flexible? And we have the case here of pharma, where it is extremely rigid what I have to do in the value chain with my IP. So that means I have to cover all my new molecules with patents, and I have to hope that sooner or later I will get a blockbuster of one of these patents. And that is the business logic in the value chain. We can compare that with a little bit more flexible situation like in the automotive. In the automotive, I have the situation that I have a lot of supplier in the supply chain, and what the OEM, the original equipment manufacturer, wants is he wants to steer and dominate the whole supplier chain via IP. So it is a little bit more flexible but relatively rigid still. And then I have the case in the telecom where I have this interoperability issue. That means the different products have to interact with each other based on standards, and what I have to do is I have to bring my technology and my patents into the standards, and then I have to hope that these standards will be used and that my patents will be licensed based on these standards. So we have here on this slide, it is shown in light gray, we have a sector going from pharma up to IT, where I have rigid, predefined IP strategies according to the value chain of that industries. And obviously I have to know them when I'm in that industry, and when I want to acquire something, for example a technology out of these industries, I have to understand the business logic and the IP logic in that industries. So, and I have the blue part upper right on that slide, and there IP strategies are relatively free selectable, so this is not so much rigid. So in the transport industry, for industrial goods and mechanical engineering, I really have to understand the detailed business model to say which IP I need there. So that means we come to the business model slide, and here I show you two business models. First, the so-called fortress monopoly. That's a relatively simple thing. It means I have a product which can be totally covered via patents, and what I want from the market is a premium price. So there's a relatively simple thing. It works very well in the chemistry industry, in the pharmaceutical industry, but of course when the patent is expired, my protection is lost, and I have the generica problem then. The second business model is a little bit smarter than the fortress monopoly. It's a so-called monopoly in a box. That means the consumer is buying something, and this product itself is not covered by that patents, but something is inside of that product, and this is proprietary to one of the supplier, and the customer is buying the product because this thing is in that product inside. And the classical example, of course, is Intel inside. So typically customers even don't know exactly what these chips are doing, and they don't know what the quality promise really tells them when it is Intel inside, but they are willing to pay a premium price for a company, for a computer which has Intel inside. So this is a classical example, but also Gore-Tex for fabrics, or Shimano for gear shifts on bicycles, are such examples where a patent-protected technology is inside of a product, and the customers are buying that because of this thing is in it. Then we have an even smarter business model. It's called the hub monopoly. That means I have a technology which is inside of a hub, or this is the hub of a wheel, and the wheel is turning around of that hub. So it is typically a standard technology like UMTS or LTE or MPEG or MP3. All these standards itself, they were licensed, and the products have to fulfill these standards. The standard itself is just there, and the product and the technology is inside of products, and these products are sold to end consumers. And of course, there's the very specific thing that I have to establish these patent standards. And this is the key technology. And of course, we see technology transfer, acquisition of patents when it is necessary to fulfill the requirements of standards, or before standards are set. Then we see negotiation of different companies simply to get in a better position for a specific standard. We saw that, for example, at Blu-ray, the Blu-ray discussion some years ago, and right now with the next generation of the mobile phone technology, the technology after LTE. And the typical, for mid-sized companies, the typical standard, the IP-based business model is the so-called value-added monopoly. That means there is a product which is more or less already existing. And this product, let's say a car, the product itself cannot be covered via a patent because it is existing, it is state of the art. But I integrate something into that product which creates a certain additional value for the customer. And of course, this additional features is quite often sold from bought from third parties and then integrated into the product. Such an example, here in Europe we have these functional foods, for example from Nestlé and or from Danone. And this is a yogurt, and we integrate a certain bacterium which is patent protected, and then this yogurt is some ways of more a better nutrition or more healthy. And this is such a value-added monopoly because the yogurt itself is already known, but now we put something inside, and that makes the product better and creates a premium price for the company. I have 4 little examples for you how this alignment between the business model in a value-added monopoly, between the business model and IP, to give you an idea why it is so important to create this alignment. So the first example, upper left side, is from Lifehide. So Lifehide is selling this rotary clothes era. So what that means is that the clothes become dry after they were in the washing machine. And of course, this line which is there is typically dirty after a week. And whoever wants to use it has to clean up that rope. And what this company did is this company asked the question: can we make it happen that this rope is always clean, right? And what they developed is a patent portfolio around of the fact that they have an always clean line on this rotary dryer, and these patents cover, so to speak, the technological solution for a customer benefit. And you have to understand the customer benefit, otherwise you read that patents and you will think, okay, they filed a lot of patents for some nice little effects, but not really something relevant. Just when you know that these companies receives an 80% premium price to a normal dryer, you understand that are really valuable patents which are created here by that company. So another example is a car park from a German company. This company created, this is the upper right example, these car parks are sold via the argumentation that you have a very specific parking experience. So typically you would say parking is a very standardized process. So around the globe you enter a car park and you look for your space and you go into the space and then the things are done. But here the idea is that this company creates a flexible car parking system. So that means that when you have, for example, an SUV, so a big car, and you need more space and you have a higher willingness to pay, you can get that because the single car park spaces are not fixed, they are just projected, and that means they are flexible. So here again a technology is used, by the way, not developed from that company, that came from outside, and this technology is used to have a flexible solution for the car parking issue. And we have in the lower left side the example of a kitchen machine from Vorwerk. It's called Thermomix. This is just a consumer product, a mixer which can make the bowl hot. It is a tremendous success here in Europe because they have integrated recipes, and what this company is doing, these companies promise you a guarantee of success, and this guarantee of success that these recipes will lead you, when you follow the recipe, the machine will guide you to a perfect result, is covered by around 150 patents and dozens of technologies which are necessary for this company to realize this guarantee of success. The last example is a company which produces high efficiency circulation pumps, and they have a very high degree of integrated electronics and smartness, so to speak, that the guy which typically has to program these pumps is no longer necessary, that the intelligence of the pump is enough to be installed. So this is an automatically installing pump, and that is again a very good position for the company against their competition. So what all these companies have in common is an understanding that their position is a value-added monopoly. So there is a specific point where there is a willingness to pay from the customers, and this is exactly where the customer benefit lies, which is offered from the company. And the IP, especially here the patents, they have the role to exclude third parties, especially competitors, from the ability to offer a comparable customer benefit. So, and quite often when this shield is not closed, you acquire IP simply to close the shield and to make sure that you're really alone when you're talking with your customer, that you have this sphere of exclusivity around of your product. And by the way, this is nothing new. This is done around the globe. This is the same strategy as, for example, Apple is covering its products, or Samsung is covering the product. This is around the globe the same strategy in value-added monopolies, and this is typically a starting point to looking for third-party patents, and there is done such an analysis, which I show you on the next slide, the legally protected value proposition. So you analyze your value proposition, so what you are really selling to the customers. We have your example of quality, reliability, low time of maintenance, of energy efficiency, time savings, and then you analyze, and you see here an example on this slide that this company has a quite bad position based on the existing IP portfolio which the company has. That means a lot of value propositions are not covered by their patent. So this is a strong impact, and saying, okay, maybe, or here really we need third-party IP or even or technology which covers our promises to the customers, that we make it exclusive and we make it enforceable against third parties. So that means the business model tells us which kind of IP do we need, and that means the next step is we look for sources of IP. Where can that come from out in the market? And for that we need a trend analysis and a technology analysis based on patent literature. And of course it is well known that we have time dependencies, we can analyze the top applicants, of course we can see which companies are very active in the different cases, we can see the regional covering which should have an alignment with our needs of our markets and our understanding in which regions we want to make business, and therefore we can get a first idea who could be an interesting partner. The second is that we look in a technology, for example, in a specific technology from a specific company, we look what are the different technical aspects which are playing a role here. This is shown on the next slide. The idea is that patent literature gives us a really deep insight. Based on the international patent classification, we can understand the structure of such a portfolio here in terms of different technologies. And on the next slide, now we put these two perspectives together, the timing perspective and the content perspective. And we can create a portfolio, and by understanding what's going on out there and maybe where is an interesting partner for a specific technology. And we see that portfolio construction here that we have on the upper left side, new technological aspects are coming up. We see it on the upper right side that there is a future technology which is interesting. On the lower right side we have expiration technology, so this is an old technology which is obviously the company go out of that technology, and on the upper left side we have totally old technologies. And when we combine this information now to a portfolio, we get a total overview where are attractive patent portfolios out there and targets where I should think about acquisition. And the same tool can be used, and can be seen on the next slide, can be used for analyzing the technology a timeline of a company. So on that slide we see that company 2, 3 and 4, the companies which create these gray lines, that these companies always file some years in the different technologies before the green companies started to file their patents. So what we see is that the company 1, which is analyzed here, has a certain time lag compared to the other companies. So we can derive out of that information purely by looking at the patent literature that this company is not ahead of the other companies. This is a follower, and what we see here may be a late follower to these technologies. And so we can analyze our targets via patent analysis. And when we found our target, the next step is that we would like to know what is the price which we have to pay for a technology or for a patent, and therefore we should understand valuation. And on the first slide of the valuation part, I show you that the value, the future economic benefit, is created by a value potential. This is the patent itself. But this patent alone has no value. Always when you want to create future economic benefits, you have to combine this patent, this potential value, with complementary assets. So with a production, with a trademark, with a brand, with marketing activities, and with a concrete exploitation process. So that means with your business model, you want to do something. And only when these three things come together, your exclusivity right, your potential value based on the patent, the complementary assets, and the exploitation process. And when these three things fit together, we create value, future economic benefit. And when we want to determine that value, we have to analyze the concrete economic situation. This is shown on the next slide, that there is something inside of the company. This is the P for the patent, the T for the technology, and the K for the know-how. And this bundle of intangible assets, this together creates a cash generating unit, a CGU, and this cash generating unit has a certain function. For example, it covers technology against imitation, and this function leads to a certain impact. For example, we are a technology leader, and this impact has to be appropriated. So we have to understand how this impact is a part of a business model. This is the appropriation. For example, I'm selling products based on my reputation as innovation leader or technology leader. And there, from this appropriation, we get an economic effect. For example, a specific market share or a premium price. And this premium price or market share creates our identifiable and isolatable cash flow. And based on this cash flow, I can start to make a calculation. And this calculation is shown on the next slide. It is based on a so-called relief from royalty approach. That means I make a valuation for my patent under the assumption that I don't own my patent. My patent is owned by a third party, and I have to pay a virtual license to this third party for the usage of this patent. And therefore I can calculate the future economic benefit based on my business plan, based on my usage for this patent. And of course you see how it is done. This is a typical calculation on a discounted cash flow analysis. So I determine the royalty rate and asset-specific risks due to the patent. I reduce that with the costs, and I need the unspecific risks, which are based on the weighted average cost of capital over the time, and then I can calculate that. Therefore, I have to determine reasonable royalty rates, and these reasonable royalty rates can come from different documented publications. And it is of course important that this royalty rate is not directly used by anyhow publication. It should be calibrated, adapted to the concrete situation. And when I'm doing that, I have typically three influencing factors for modeling the royalty rate. I have portfolio-related value factors, I have technological value factors, and competition-related value factors. So that means that in that royalty rate, I have the whole model of my economic situation, which I have to evaluate here. Typically, I have to analyze the relevant sales, which are projected in my business plan. This relevant sales has typically been reduced to the technical part for my patent, and there to the patent protected part. That means, for example, when I have an income stream for a car, and I have an improved windscreen wiper, that means I have to reduce the relevant sales here to the windscreen wiper, and not to take the revenues based on the car. And of course I have the specific risks of my legal asset here, of my patent. So I have to introduce the legal factors, for example the status of the patent, the freedom to operate, and all these different influencing factors which you see here on the slide. On the first slide and on the second slide, we have the necessity evaluation of the so-called useful life. That means when I want to determine a value, I have to determine future economic benefits. So I have to say how long do I have to make that calculation. That means I have to understand, when I buy a technology, when I buy a patent, I have to model the whole economic situation of my usage, and in that case I have to determine how long will I use that technology, because this is a crucial influencing factor to my valuation. So as a summary, of this introduction into that topic. When we talk about IP strategies and technology sourcing and mergers and acquisitions, I have three very important parts should have in mind. The first thing is I have to understand business models and the relevance of IP in business models. Second, I have to understand technology trends, and I have to identify targets for sourcing. And the third thing is I have to be able to calculate price tags. At least I have to understand the future economic benefit for my company when I acquire a certain technology or a patent. That is what I want to say to you for the moment. Thank you very much.